All right, yeah, just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the band, how the show's been going lately.
It's been great. We just finished 3 dates with Unwound in the Pacific Northwest, and that was just super fun. And we've known them, I don't know, since like 1990, 91, something like that. And yeah, and it's been great because those were short shows. Our headlining shows are longer, but
Right,
those were like 40-minute shows, and it's kind of like what we used to do, just
right.
turn it on and not stop for 40 minutes.
Yeah, that's awesome. How was that first show at Emo's last year?
That was good. Yeah, it was really fun. We it was the first time in a long time, and so I think we were a little nervous about how it would go, but yeah, it was
Yeah,
good.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. So I know you guys have Dale, right, from Neurosis. Or
That's or
Noah, sorry, Noah. Yeah, yeah. How's it playing? How's it like playing with four people now?
It's great actually. Well, I mean, Noah and I go, Noah and the band goes back really far, but Noah and I have been really close friends for, I don't know, 30 plus years. And in the old days, we couldn't replicate the stuff we did on records just
Mhm.
because we use triggered cassette players for our samples,
Right.
and we change our set list every night too, so it just was like chaos. But we were kind of young, and our shows were just, they were chaos, and in that
Right.
era that kind of was like kind of really sold it. Whereas
Yeah.
now we kind of were like, well, these are going to be bigger shows, and we should probably have some way to organize them. And so having him up there, triggering the kind of samples that and love, like that from the records. I
Yeah.
mean, if you do love them,
Yes. Yes.
um, it's great. I mean, and Noah's just like such a good friend, and
Yeah.
he's just a perfect fit for the band, and he's contributing in other ways too, and
Right.
helping
So he's
helping.
kind of like manning like the cassettes and all of the like the kind of
Yeah,
audio stuff from the music, right?
yeah, all the samples and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And so
right,
he has actual samplers that he plays, so that they happen in time with the music. and
yeah,
and then he's also playing cassettes too, just like we still have cassettes as well.
right.
So there's still a little bit of that chaos sort of
Yeah,
rhythm.
that's awesome. And
Yeah.
the whole idea of like cassettes, it's kind of like a really unique thing. How did you, I guess, like when you guys started, what was the idea for kind of incorporating that into your sound?
Well, Dale had a like a reel to reel dictaphone
Hmm.
recorder, and you could do it with the thumb switch on the microphone would kind of turn the tape on and off, and we were playing with that, and I was like, wait a minute. I looked at the connector, and I realized that there's two pins, and one's like this, it's called a micro or a sub mini, and I was like, well, I wonder if I hooked that up to a foot switch, if we could trigger it, and it worked.
Yeah,
And then we were kind of like, oh, well, reel to those, all of that stuff was really common back then, but the reel to reel was a little more of a pain in the ass. and
yeah,
and it turned out cassette players had the exact same connector,
right.
and so it was kind of, as soon as we figured that out, it was like game on.
Yeah. And you were kind of into like old TV shows, like kind of movies, stuff like that. Like for example, like like the song Soul Cannon, like that
Hmm.
like welcome welcome thing. Like what is that from?
I
As
think
far as
that's, I if I were I and it's, I'm not sure, my memory is that great, but I believe that's from a movie called Gross Anatomy.
Okay,
It's
okay.
like a comedy. I mean, it was
Yeah.
just like the stupid, comedy about kids in college taking
Yeah.
anatomy classes, and they're kind of, I think, if I remember right, they're going to like a dissection, human dissection.
Right.
So it's
Right.
like a room full of corpses, and the teacher is just this goofy dude.
Yeah.
So it was, think about, we would have been your age, and this would have been in the mid 80s, and we're in a band, so
Yeah.
we pretty much barely worked and hung out, watched TV a lot,
Yeah.
and old movies, and so we just recorded everything that was. This is all that stuff is kind of just a reflection of
Right.
like what we were consuming,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. No, that's funny because I the last few shows I've just been opening my show with that song just because I think it's a cool like welcome welcome to the show.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
that's a fun song.
We used to
So
open our set on occasion that
oh, did
way.
you? Yeah, that's awesome. As far as like set lists go, do you like I guess now do you kind of I know you've only played what 7 or 8 shows, but have you kind of switched it up or do you kind of have like a consistent kind of thing.
We kind of, because Noah's there, and we have kind of segues and stuff like that. We have been playing a more kind of consistent set, but we try to switch it up every set of shows, right?
Okay.
So like we were in the Pacific Northwest last spring to do our headlining set, and we had a set for that. We had a different set for Great American Music Hall, and we'll have a similar but somewhat different set for SoCal too.
Sweet.
Yeah.
And then like before, I guess the reunion, were you guys kind of doing like the Fugazi, like let's just come up with the set list on the spot, or was it kind of a
Oh
plan?
yeah, it was literally like minutes before we went
Yeah.
on. He like write it because you kind of read the room and
Right, right.
see what the vibe is, and
Yeah,
kind of.
that's awesome.
And that's why the cassettes were just they're random because
Right.
it's not a sampler, and samplers back then were too expensive. And we toured so much that
Yeah,
even those cheap cassette players are hard to keep functioning, and
right,
we just go to a Radio Shack and buy a new one.
right.
But like a sampler is something you got to really take care of,
Yeah, yeah.
and so yeah.
Would you have ever guessed like you'd be playing steel pole bathtub shows in 2024? Was that even like thought of that
I'm
could
pretty
happen?
sure I didn't think I'd be alive in 2024, let alone playing shows. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's
That's
pretty
funny.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the fact that like I guess, I'm 19, I'm a fan of the band. Like is that kind of, do you see like younger kids at the shows? Like is that ever like
We do,
yeah,
and I actually love it. I'm like kind of a big fan of the current youth culture,
yeah,
particularly live music.
yeah,
There's a good scene in San Francisco, and I know there's a good scene in LA too. I've heard lots of good things
yeah,
about what's going on down
yeah,
there, and I just think it's kind of cool that I don't know, somehow culture has reached this place where 30 years, like it's not that different somehow. You know what
right.
I mean? Like that it
Yeah.
can be appreciated still.
Yeah, yeah.
I
I mean,
mean, when
sorry.
I was your age, 30 years would have meant like, holy, would have meant like sometime in the 50s. And
Right.
so,
Yeah.
we weren't
Yeah.
relating to music from the 50s,
Right, right, right.
80s,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, it's also kind of weird how like if you think about it, you have instant access to like any type of music like whenever you want. And obviously you used to have to go to like record stores and all that. And I don't
Oh,
know.
yeah.
What do you kind of think about the whole streaming thing?
I struggle with it. I use it. I do. I mean, I
Yeah.
have a Spotify account, which I really need to stop because that guy's such an beep,
Yeah.
and the deal that he's made with major labels is truly like demonic.
Yeah.
It's not a good thing for artists or the business in general, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
But it's convenient, which is definitely tends to win out.
Yeah.
And I do like the fact that things have become more pluralized. Like
Right.
more people can make art and people can
Right.
consume it more freely. But I really miss the sort of curated aspect of human to human. Like, it's like, yeah, we go to the record store, you'd ask a friend or
Yeah.
someone to hand you a tape, and you'd
Right.
be like, wow, what's that song?
Yeah.
And that's kind of how you discovered things. Whereas now I feel like I just type in the same thing and end
Yeah.
up with the same, like, 30 songs or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I that stuff could obviously be improved, but I don't know. I kind of go back and forth. Like there's kind
Yeah.
of, if you were to say Bandcamp's great because
Yeah.
almost anybody can put
Right.
stuff up, and I think there's a pretty flourishing universe of interesting music there. But there's so much. It's
Yeah.
like,
I
you know,
know. It's overwhelming.
it can be,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I guess also like with the, if you're holding a record or something, I feel like you'll listen to it more, right? As instead of just kind of going listen to a couple songs here and there, but it's like you kind of spend time with it and that kind
Yeah.
of thing. But
I always loved, I mean, I still have a ton of vinyl.
yeah,
I listen to it fairly regularly, but when you bought a record, it was like, you got the front cover, you got the back cover, so you got the insert,
right.
whatever, like, and so it was such a kind of like a whole experience. You go home
Yeah,
and put it on and listen, and
right.
it was such a deep experience as opposed to stumbling across some song on Spotify or whatever, and
Yeah,
it's kind of just, it becomes more what's the word, disposable, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we gotta support local record stores,
Yeah, right on. I believe
Yeah,
in
yeah,
that for sure.
yeah.
We'll have some vinyl at the show.
Oh, nice.
We don't have a ton, but we do have some. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Unlistenable album.
Uh-huh.
So from what I understand, originally you wanted to do a cover of the Cars' first album. Is that
Yeah.
kind of what happened? And then I guess Slash Records wasn't a fan of that. Is that kind of how?
I yeah, it kind of was like that. I think in retrospect, like when we put that record together, I think there was a bit of some grievance, that
Yeah.
it wasn't the sole thing that made us stop playing, but it certainly didn't help. And Bob Biggs, who's a legend, LA guy, he started Slash to put out the first Germs single.
Right. Right.
And it had done a magazine, right? It was like a newspaper magazine, punk, and he was just amazing. And but he had kind of told us like, hey, we're there for your art, we're there to back you up, and
Yeah.
this is a long-term investment. And so I think we were a little bummed that he didn't quite understand what we were trying to do, and that
Right.
there was kind of a sense of humor there. And
Yeah.
um but looking back, really realistically, I think his business situation and how what he was trying to keep his label surviving and
Yeah.
whatnot, his deal with Warner Brothers had kind of come to an end at that time. And so like our record was actually released through Scars from Falling Down, was released through London, not Warner
Right.
Brothers.
Right.
And so there was kind of I mean, like as an adult,
Yeah.
like looking back, I kind of understand,
Yeah.
he probably had a bunch of concerns that we weren't thinking about, because we were just like, yeah, we're gonna
Right.
make
Right.
art, and let's
Yeah.
go. Um,
So that was going on, and then were you still playing shows at that point, or was it just like you kind of wrote those songs and then it kind of fizzled out, or how did that
we
kind of?
yeah we were I mean, we were always playing shows. I don't think we were touring so heavily at that point.
Uh-huh.
We were kind of because that's when we started all living in different places. Before then, we'd all lived in San Francisco.
Right.
And we kind of everyone sort of started to have different desires for their personal lives. And
Yeah.
so we tried to put that, and that was just a demo, that I think that's probably the thing that was the bigger bummer, is that they just didn't understand that we were kind of just messing around, and that
Right.
to
Yeah.
make a record, we would have gone in the studio and done a
Right.
proper
Yeah.
steelable version of the Cars' first album, which
Right.
is all hits. So
Right. Yeah. That's awesome. So how did you kind of go from like working in music to ending up doing, visual effects and composing music for like Valve games and all that? Like, what was that transition like for you?
yeah, well, I mean, that definitely happened over a lot of years, but the thing with I don't know, being in a band back then, I'm sure it's true to some degree still, but like especially in the Bay Area and Steel Bathtub, we were like an art band. And
Yeah.
so all of our friends and people we hung out with in the local scene were all artists. So there were a lot of people who worked at a place called Colossal Pictures, who did all the interstitial stuff and liquid television on MTV, right? So they did all this crazy cool animation work, and a lot of those people were friends of ours, came to our shows and whatnot.
Okay.
And so as we were ending, I had been playing around with animation at that time.
Okay. Cool.
And they a friend who was a producer there was coming over for dinner and saw something I was with, and I'm sorry, like
Oh,
I
it's
was
okay. I'll beep it out. Don't worry.
and she was just like, wait, I didn't know you could do this, do you want a job? And at the time,
Yeah.
we were still touring. I was like,
Right.
nah, I
Yeah.
enjoy doing this, I don't want a job, it'll ruin the fun of it,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
but then when we decided to stop playing, that's when I was like, wow, I need a job. So I called her up,
Mhm.
and I went in and talked to them, and they hired me pretty much on the spot.
Yeah.
And and I suddenly was making like 5 times as much
Right.
money as I
Yeah.
had been the entire time we were touring.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Um,
that's awesome.
yeah, and then some years late went by, I did film work and all that
Uh-huh.
stuff. And I really enjoyed doing visual effects and animation, but
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to get back to music,
Right.
and again, connections,
Mhm.
through that work kind
Yeah.
of just led me to Valve, and I've been there
Yeah.
almost 20 years. Yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. Well, that's cool. Now you're kind of able to do both worlds, right?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that
The
a cool
the
thing?
band, I think, for all of us has been an experiment, but it's
Yeah.
also like Noah with Neurosis, although they haven't, due to certain
Yeah.
circumstances in the band, they haven't done anything in a while.
Yeah.
But their model was kind of, they all have jobs and they all have normal lives, and then they go on tour like it's a vacation,
Right. Right. Yeah.
and so that's sort of what we've been doing to
That's
some degree.
awesome.
Yeah,
And then your project Cassette Prophet, how long have you been doing that?
It's interesting. Like in its current incarnation, we first started it about I want to say almost 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Um, but it's been around for 20 years because once I kind of stopped Steelable Bathtub, friends, Scott Kelly from Neurosis was doing a solo thing, and asked if I wanted to do a solo thing to open.
Right.
And so I kind of threw this thing together based on these stories from these cassettes that I had found in thrift stores. And so I kind of had been over those 20 years, I've been asked several times to do something like that. And this last time someone asked me, I was like, oh, I'll just put together a band,
Yeah.
and make it proper. And so, yeah, that's super fun, actually.
Awesome.
Yeah.
How often are you doing that? Is that kind of just like a here and there thing, or?
Yeah, it has been, pretty much just opportunistically whenever
Yeah.
someone asks us to play, or,
Uh-huh.
some situation comes up.
Yeah.
But we haven't played through most of summer, partially because of Steel Bathtub, but also because we've recorded our first album.
Oh,
So
awesome.
that will, we're trying to figure out what to do with it and
Yeah.
whatnot.
Sweet.
So we'll start playing out more now that time is, that's kind of out of the way. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. And then for Steel Pull Bathtub, I saw something like you guys released a minute of a new song or something.
Oh, yeah. So
It
yeah,
was kind of funny, something like on loop or something.
yeah, there's kind of a story there. We have the song that's like 7 minutes long, and what the song actually is kind of a surprise at the end.
Right.
And so we were listening to the first part, and we are like, God, this is just so great. Let's just release this with video. But then I was like, 1 minute of it is actually like you can kind of just listen on loop, and it
Yeah.
is really cool.
Yeah.
And something I picked up from the YouTube kids, particularly gamers, like gay music fans.
Yeah.
They'll often find some short thing in a video game
Right.
and just loop it forever. Just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you can listen to this all day long. And so I was like, why don't we do that? There's a minute version that's social media.
Right.
And so there'll be 8 of those, I think 7 or 8 of those.
Okay.
And they've got this video from a dear friend of Noah's who passed away, and it's cool arty video. And so we'll release, 7 or 8 of those, and then we'll finally release the whole song, and everyone will be like, oh, that's what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So this is all new material, or is this stuff that you've had like
That's new material. We
Okay.
went into the studio last, I don't know, 6 months ago or whatever.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
it was just kind of experiment. Like, what
Right.
if we just went in and spent a day, because we have, a lot of friends with studios.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
so yeah, that we came out of it with a couple tunes that we'll probably release in some format. I think we all came away going, is that how we want to do this? Like,
Yeah.
is that what we are now? Or,
Yeah.
and so I don't think we've quite landed on what it is we would
Right.
like, if we were to say make a record or something.
Yeah.
We don't currently have any plans for, but
Uh-huh.
if we were, like, what would that, we're not sure that this is what that would look like, so
Right.
it's kind of a single and experiment.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then are you guys kind of like finding new music, or do you kind of like listen to some of old stuff? Like, kind of, what do you, I guess, listen to musically? Like, is it kind of all over the place?
It is kind of all over the place. Like I said, the streaming thing has me, just I tend to go back to the good old, like I love Spiritualized, and I listen to Godspeed You Black Emperor a lot, and and all the bands that I would have listened to back in the day, or more modern takes on it, things that they progressed forward to. But I also, like Black Angels, I listened to them a lot, and recently I discovered is it Slift, I think, they're a French band.
It rings a bell.
Yeah, it's kind of just like,
this,
kind of spacey ongoing space rock. and God, who else is, I was just thinking of somebody recently that oh, I mean, the OCs are huge now, which is so funny because they're local.
Right. Yeah.
John
Yeah.
Dwyer was a, kind of a peer of ours, although I think he's a little younger. He came a little later, but a
Mhm.
San Francisco artist, and their shows are amazing. And so listen to them. I mean, I'm pretty
Yeah.
much open to anything
Yeah.
that is interesting. Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, how did the name Steel Pole Bathtub come about? Because I've got to say it's the greatest band name I've heard in my life.
Yeah. Well, we don't really say, there's a lot of myth around that. But yeah, there is, I'll just say this, there is a steel pole sitting in a bathtub currently in a basement in Montana. And so that's all I can say. Yeah.
All right, all right. That's funny. I just got a couple more questions. We'll wrap this up. I know you got a meeting pretty quick. As far as bands you've played with, like, do you have a really memorable show, like some bands you played with that just really stick out to you as far as like performance or just overall energy?
Yeah, I mean, wow. Whew. There's just so
There's
many.
a lot, yeah.
Yeah. And and it just kind of covers a big era. One of our very first, so we kind of had a couple different eras of the band. Like at
Yeah.
the very beginning, we were all acoustic, kind of
Okay.
just playing in the streets. And it
Uh-huh.
was just me and Dale and this our original drummer Nate. And
Okay.
then we got electric, and then we got a drummer who was more like a trap. Nate just was kind of like a floor tom and
Yeah.
cymbals, snare standing up player. And so there was that era. But then when we finally picked up Dorothy as a drummer in Seattle,
Mhm.
our first real show coming out of that was in Montana, opening for Sonic Youth on
Wow.
their sister tour.
Wow.
And that was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Being our first show too out was
Yeah.
pretty special. And yeah, I mean, we did a bunch of tours with the Flaming Lips. That's the thing, is kind of like, I don't think of them as shows specifically as much as like spending time with a band on
Right.
tour is a
Right.
pretty kind of unique experience that
Yeah.
you can only really get if you're in a band. And
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
and it's a neat way. And so we toured with Flaming Lips several times really early on, and those were just so great.
Uh,
I now I'm gonna feel like I'm leaving anything out. I mean, those tours, like obviously we played with Nirvana several times, even on other shows too, and because they were from Seattle and a little younger. And that it's kind of funny, like obviously they were a great band, but it's more like in retrospect, it's amazing,
right. Right.
um,
Like in the moment, it was just, you're just doing
they're
it.
just another band,
Yeah.
we're
Right.
not
Right.
just another band because we
Yeah.
knew them, and
Yeah.
from Seattle,
Yeah.
but it was that kind of thing. And oh, there's I just did a post with where we met our tour manager Joe O'Neill. We played at the Palace in
Uh-huh.
LA with L7.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That was kind of later on, and it was
Yeah.
always, anytime we played with them was always super fun. And
Awesome.
there, yeah, I mean, there's just so many. It's kind of crazy.
I bet. Did you guys ever do a show with Fugazi?
We never played with Fugazi. We did play at DC Space in
Uh-huh.
DC, and Ian came out, and
Oh, nice.
we met him, and
Very cool.
we never, I saw them
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
but we never played together.
Yeah.
Seems like we might have been a good match.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were maybe a little more aggressive, but
Right. Right.
it's kind of, they had a really unique sound, and our sound, I think, is
Yeah.
fairly singular. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Hey, Mike, that's pretty much all I've got. I really appreciate you taking some time to talk, man.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. I will make sure the lodge room is packed with Loyola Marymount students.
Awesome. Yeah.
So yeah.
We love, like I said, we love seeing younger folks in the
Yeah.
audience. Like, you guys have such a better attitude than we did.
All right, Mike. Hey, you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you at the show. Thanks for talking.
Ryan, thanks. Please come say hello.
We'll do. We'll do. All right, man. Have a good one.
All right. See ya. Bye.
Bye.